Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. It's David Baer here, and today we're going to be diving into the topic of the marketing agency, marketing services world, the good, the bad, the ugly. And before we do, I got to say, totally off topic. I live here in Portland, Oregon, just down the road from the international headquarters of this shoe company you probably have heard of called Nike. And I have some friends who work there, and they said that our number one mission is for every single day, everyone in the world to encounter our logo at one point in their day. And I just did, thanks to my guest. Colby Wegter is wearing some beautifully branded I was going to say swag, but it's not swag. You didn't get it for free. You probably paid for that, an outfit with the Nike logo on it. So that is an odd introduction to why you're here and what we're going to actually be talking about. But it is marketing related because getting that brand like ingrained in somebody's mind, right? That's a big part of what they're all about. Let's get back to the main topic, which is really all about the world of marketing agencies, marketing service providers. And this is a world that I actually entered into back in around 2010 or so. I was a marketer inside of a wine importing company. I was the head of marketing and sales, and then suddenly found myself out on the street. And I thought, oh, well, there's this new thing called Facebook advertising that started a couple of years ago. Maybe it's now mature enough for me to start introducing as a productized service for the wine industry that I'm a part of. So I went out and I started an agency. And I'm not going to share the details of my story, except to say that I'm pretty sure as we get into a conversation that some of the things that I experienced are the things that are still experienced by agency owners out there, the challenges and also the great opportunities that exist. But that is really the focus of the work that Colby is doing, and the stuff that I have been living and breathing pretty much for the last 14 years. So Colby, welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Davo. And it's always nice to speak with a fellow practitioner who has over a decade under their belt, right? So this should be, I'm sure there'll be some fireworks with this.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry about the diversion with the Nike thing, except that I always love encountering that, and like it happens every single freaking day.
Yeah, it's funny. No diversion at all. I was captivated because I am super late to the party. I only read Shoe Dog this year for the first time. And that's one of that I will definitely go back to. So if nobody knows what Shoe Dog is, it's just the kind of the origin story of Phil Knight, the Nike founder. So,
Okay, you
but
you
yeah,
you have
loved that.
yeah, you just by saying that, you brought up something that I think is at the core of an observation that I have made being in and around the marketing service provider space. And that's that there's from my perspective two types of agency owners out there. There are those who really understand their craft but not business, and those who actually go beyond the channel that they happen to be a specialist, SEO or pay per click ads or direct mail or whatever it is that they're an expert in, and actually understand what's inside the businesses that they're serving. And they are doing things like reading books about business. And so I want to ask you about your own experience, from that perspective, because you also spent a lot of time in the agency space before you came to the point where you started serving agencies. Where did you begin in terms of your appreciation and understanding of marketing? And then where did you begin in terms of your appreciation and understanding of business in general?
Man, I love that question because I've never gotten it before, but it's actually incredibly relevant to me today because I am. You mentioned we'll talk about calendars before we recorded, and so I spent a lot of time producing content about just this, like that kind of part of the story. Because in my 20s, Dave, I was like not ambitious at all, right? Like I've pretty much fallen into any career, any career change I've ever had. And so I actually went to school to be a teacher, but then that didn't work out. So I fell into marketing, and it's just something I had an aptitude for quite a bit. So, like in my 20s, I would say I was a practitioner, had no business acumen whatsoever. But then, quite honestly, like it just got a bit on the more boring side, or it just seemed too formulaic, and that sort of stuff is like do this, get X outcome, right? So, it was around 2015, 2016. I was working internal marketing at a time for an IT company, which was also not that interesting subject matter wise. It was pretty boring, whereas my generation would say lame. But when it came down to it, I had worked at an agency prior to that, and a couple other guys had just filed an LLC and were looking for a project manager, which was my background. And I thought that was kind of the moment to say, you know what, I actually do want to learn like how this starts from the beginning to the end, right? Start from $0 total bootstrap to how far can we take it? And so I would say my interest in business happened around 2016, 2017. Didn't really pick it up too much until around 2020 when I tried to start my own agency, like on the side, and realized, oh, wow, this is huge. And it's nice to have a much better structure around you than just start from scratch again. And so I let that go for a little bit, had a handful of clients, and then was like, just fired them all and said, you know what, I'm going to do my full-time gig. And then how I've gotten all the way to wanting to now walk away from all of that, running my own agency, to helping agency owners, is because we got from zero to the agency, who I'm still on fantastic terms with. I only resigned a couple months ago to be able to pursue this full time. Is at around 2.8 million now, right? But the cool thing about it was like the vehicle. And to answer your question specifically, is even though I was a project manager and was like the person fulfilling and delivering, at every moment I would be speaking to clients. And so having over 1,100 clients in my career, I would just keep speaking, keep speaking, keep speaking. And then more importantly, listening. They didn't really care what I was providing. They just cared what results it was getting. Right. And so that takes a long time to realize they don't care what I do. They just care of what I can get them on the tail end. And so start speaking their language. So I would just ask a lot more business questions. And then ironically, it turned into a lot of just trust being built. And so now I barely, SEO is my core competency. I barely talk about SEO and marketing on any of my client calls anymore. We're really talking about business and then fitting marketing into, what specific role will this play in hitting your goals and targets, right? So I know it's kind of a long, all over winding answer, but it started with like no business acumen, just okay and good at marketing, kept clients a long time. And then it turned into wanting to build something from scratch and then actually doing that. And now I just love it. It's like a never ending problem that you can keep trying to solve and get better.
All right. So I want to understand a little bit deeper into like what these conversations were about and where you started hearing their language and saying, I need to speak that language. What are the types of things that you would hear businesses discussing? In our world, we often say that finance is actually should be the language of marketing, right? Whenever we come into a business and we show up differently from every other marketer out there because we're actually talking about finance, and they go, oh, where have you been all my life? Right? What were the things that you heard from businesses that you said, oh, this is the stuff that actually is important. This is the stuff I need to be focusing on with them.
Right. Yeah. I actually wrote that down. Finance should be the language of marketing. I think that's great. So, honestly, I would say it was more kind of when you've had as many clients as I've had, Dave, then it really comes down into just like paying attention when something kind of goes wrong or paying attention when something is consistently happening. And something I noticed was clients loved us, but there was an element of they might still leave prematurely. And I was trying to figure out why? Because if we were doing SEO, which was our bread and butter, they would be getting amazing results with what we'd provide. We'd do exactly what we'd say and then some, right? So they would increase their website traffic, as an example, not by a couple hundred people, but like 2x, 5x, 10x, right? They'd have all this opportunity. And of course, it was qualified traffic. We would never purchase it to look good or anything like that. And they would still, 6 months in or 12 months in, they might be like, well, we're thinking about cutting marketing because we're just not seeing results, right? And it's one of those things where you realize like, okay, first of all, this is kind of a pain point for me because I don't feel like I have control. And second of all, I need to understand how to make my business more sustainable, how to kind of make it more bulletproof, that I don't have to rely on a client's individual business where even if we get results, if they can't fulfill, if they can't do their end of the bargain, like convert, that I'm going to lose them. And I don't want to lose them. And so it was kind of bred out of having that happen a handful of times where I was like, okay, staying in my lane has been great. And I know I can get a really good 5-star review and I can have people refer and all that sort of stuff. And they love working with me. But I want their business for a decade. I want to keep them for a long time. And if I want to keep them for a decade, I need to learn how to basically make their business bulletproof so that mine becomes bulletproof as a result. Right. And so these conversations would transition into, okay, if you're not getting sales, and I actually wrote about this just to give you an example so I don't waffle on. We did SEO, it was getting traffic to company websites and that sort of stuff for their services and products. One of our clients saw that 10x growth, and then they came to us in a monthly call and said, hey, we're thinking about cutting, because marketing is also the easiest thing to cut because people don't understand it, right? And so I said, all right, well, just give me a month or two more and let me figure this out. Within about 30 minutes, I realized if I audit their phone calls, I might learn something. So when I audited their phone calls, the person who would take the intake, because they were getting a ton of calls, they were getting like 80 calls just organically every single month. And they would typically close a majority of those if they got through. But that was a problem. The person receiving the intake would forward them to a voicemail, and the people would hang up before they left a message. Right? These were like only organic calls.
Yep.
We were only trafficking organic calls. And so I just mentioned this to them. They tightened up their intake, and within 30 days, they had a record-breaking sales month. The following month, they broke that record. That was not an SEO problem. That was not in my lane, right?
Yep.
So that was like a really good illustration of I need to go deeper because, yes, it benefits me, but I'm in the business of results. Like, these clients should be getting better results. You start to accept kind of the role of, let me help them get out of their own way, or I'm not a provider, I'm an educator on how to make their business better. So that was kind of those transitions.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So as you know, we approach this same problem from slightly different angles in the work that we each do, and I've seen this, I mean, firsthand. So I said, the good, bad, the ugly, and when I was early on in running my Facebook agency, by the way, I refer to it as a Facebook agency because Meta didn't exist back in 2010.
Right.
I would often find myself losing clients either because I was doing such a great job that they couldn't keep up because they didn't have capacity for all the stuff that I was sending them, and they were like, "Okay, well, we don't need you right now because we're too busy."
Yep.
Or the another problem that I ran into, and this, I hear both of these from agency owners all the time, or I would recommend something that was outside of my lane, right? I was doing Facebook and I would say, hey, you have no email follow-up mechanism, or you have no capture on your website, or you have no more. Thanks for the advice. That's great. Hey, I can help you with that, right? And then they would come back to me maybe 4 or 5 months later and they'd say, hey, that advice that you gave me? Well, I met somebody at a conference and I hired them. And I know this is a pain point for you because I read this very scenario on your website. So these are things that marketers are dealing with on a regular basis. How do you attack that? What is your approach to addressing that aside from, being more valuable to them? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important discussion too, because if you're an agency owner and you don't have a decade in, right, you've probably fallen into the trap numerous times of just do more, offer more free stuff, go above and beyond, and that sort of stuff. And there is no perfect answer. And what I can say is just through my personal experience of like trial and error is I think a lot of this stuff happens on the front end. And a lot of it is more on what would be deemed like the soft skills than the actual offer or what you provide or anything like that, right? And so just a couple of examples that I personally use is explaining exactly what it is, right? When clients would come into us, they would think what we were really providing them was leads and sales. And I would confirm with them, like in the first week or on the very first call, I'd be like, what do you think you bought? Right. Which is just something a lot of people they're not even willing to say because their client's in control and there's a level of entitlement because they pay money and there's a transaction there. And I'm over here being like, my job is not to do everything the client wants me to do. My job is to facilitate exactly what they purchase to get the result that they are seeking. Right. And if they don't know how the details and the individual steps to get that result look, I'm just selling air. First of all, I'm selling air anyway. The pen I'm holding in my hand right now is more tangible than marketing, right? Nobody knows exactly what you're purchasing when you do it. And so I would get it down to brass tacks. What do you think you bought? And they would say leads and sales. I say, no, you didn't. Right? Or keywords or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I said, anyone can do what we do. You can start an agency in minutes and have it fully functioning in a week, right? So what you bought is expertise because we have over 10,000 hours per person to execute these things and saving time. So you don't have to do it, right? If they actually think they're buying Google results or they're buying leads and sales, and I let that go, I am actively contributing to the problem.
Yeah.
Because I can't sell for them. And if it's keywords in Google, I'm not Google. Google changes their algorithm 25 times a day at a minimum, right? My job's to keep up, not like I would joke with clients. I would say, if I can get you number one guaranteed for your top product, I would call Google right now and say, hey, we just signed this client, go do it. And then I would charge you $100,000. And they would laugh. It's like, that's what we're talking about is hard work. You don't have the time to do it. And even if you did have the time, you wouldn't do it well because you don't have mastery, right? And so to prevent them from going elsewhere, I needed clarity at every level, right? Conversations like that. And then also milestones. We expect this here. We expect this here. We expect this here. We can't control all of this, but this is an expectation, that sort of stuff. We have other extenuating factors here. If we don't hit it, fire us. Just like walking in and saying, like, I don't need your business and you shouldn't keep me if I can't perform. I think that's a problem with a lot of agency owners that I speak to, is they are so tied to their clients, terrified that business is going to walk out the door if they don't keep their clients happy. They think happiness is doing more. Happiness is clarity. Before you started your agency, you were an employee at the wine spot, right? Did you care more about 4 weeks of vacation or knowing that you didn't have to suffer mental warfare every day because you knew exactly what you were supposed to do, how your boss would react when you did it, all that sort of stuff? As an employee, you crave clarity. Clients are like glorified employees.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I sound like, hopefully I don't want to say amateur or just too direct, but I have a 4-year-old right now. Not too many of my conversations with him are that different from conversations I would have with clients. I would just add a little bit more professionalism on it. But we're really talking about expectations, what to expect, what I need from you, right? So, like, I'm sure you have other questions, so I'll cut it here. But like a perfect example would be, we created a slide deck explaining exactly whose role was what, so that clients wouldn't have to hear me say it. They could see it. And we would do it like in the first 3 months on every call. We just show them the same slide deck. We're in charge of this. Here's how it looks. You're in charge of this. Here's how it looks. And by doing that, we avoided so many conversations that we previously had before we had that deck, as an example, because clients thought we provided leads and sales, as an example.
So, okay, I was about to ask you about that, and I want to go a little deeper on that last point that you made. When you start introducing this slide deck and you talk about roles and responsibilities between the service provider and the client, what was the change in behavior that you saw on the client's part, or what were the things that were happening? Complaints, concerns, frustration on their part, whatever it might have transpired, that went away.
Yeah, I think it's that, and the reason I bring up the toddler thing is because there's just that element of accountability, right? And so, again, when there is money on the table, we react in this really strange way where it's like, okay, they have power over me now, even though they need my expertise. I'm going to do what they say, and it just seems incredibly odd to me, or at least I took it. I learned the hard way, but in the last 5 years of my career, I was always thinking, any campaign that a client was running, now I want to know their business goals and their skill sets and their desires intimately. But if they're running the campaign, I'm not doing my job. If they're making suggestions and those are the loudest suggestions in the room, I'm not doing my job.
So you're saying, like, if you're an order taker, they're saying, okay, you push the buttons, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. Is that what you're talking about?
Pretty much. Like, think of a common example. I'm sure you heard this, right? So if you're a full service agency, so we did SEO, but a lot of clients would say, well, I think we need to be really active on social media. Okay. Inherently not a bad idea, right? They haven't been active to this point and they've gotten to $10 million a year. Okay. So we could start this brand new thing, which is basically trying to learn piano, or we could actually dial in on what's worked, just do it better, and have very good forecasts of what numbers you can hit when this works. Right. So it's keeping them away from the shiny object thing. And I did a post about this recently, and like so many people, I mean, for my the size of my audience anyway, so many people resonated with it. And the message was very simple. When a client suggests something, instead of saying yes, your default should be tell me more or
Mm-hmm.
why,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the thing when you tell a client to tell you more or ask them to go deeper, you'll realize that over 50% of the time, they just heard that suggestion elsewhere and they don't actually have a reasonable justification for why they want to do it,
Yeah.
right? And again, if we go back all the way to like, what is the core of my role? My role is to save them time. Then I should be actively dissuading them from doing something that takes focus away from what's working and what will work, right? Now, that's social media as an example. Like every business should be in as many places as you can if you can manage it. But for many of our clients, we had a lot of manufacturing clients. We had a lot of industrial clients. They are not getting sales calls even from their website. Or I should say, not sales calls. They're not getting sales from their websites. They're getting sales from calls,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're definitely not getting a sale from a tweet. Now you could, right? But I'd put more of my efforts into the 80, 90, 99% that I know will deliver than the 20% that sounds kind of fun or the 1% that sounds kind of fun because somebody else is doing it, right?
So, I actually just today saw an industrial company in the chemical space that was on social platforms that were not logical given what they do, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
why are you wasting time and energy there? So this is I think a really valid point as a marketer coming in and looking at what a business either is doing or responding to what they want to do. In my experience, a lot of marketers, and forgive me because this is going to sound pejorative, but are technicians. They're really, really
Mm-hmm.
good at the technology that they manage, but they're not so good at the strategic approach to marketing and business, which goes back to the question I asked you earlier about when do you get interested in marketing, and then when do you actually get interested in what marketing does, which
Yeah.
is the business part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was is probably mostly the vehicle, right? Because a lot of agency owners I talk to as well, like one of my first questions, if I'm qualifying to work with them as an example, I'll ask them, how often do you speak to your clients, right? And so it's all over the board, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if it's every day, every week, every month, whatever. But then the next question is, okay, what do you talk about? Well, we catch them up on the campaign, and then we do the next meeting. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Like everything you do as part of what you fulfill should be in like a data board somewhere, should be automated in terms of spitting things out. Like when I was doing it the hard way, clients relied on me to deliver the information,
Mhm.
right? It's 2024. Like all of this information is readily available. What your job is to say, what is the problem we're solving for right now? Does everyone have a full understanding of how that problem is being solved and when it is considered solved? And then what's the next problem when that one is solved? Right? It's like the next right thing. And so that's why all of my conversation, you actually, there's so many ways we can go with this. That's the thing of the marketer too, right? But you said something earlier, a chemical company spending time and energy, right? Now, I think this will be on YouTube so people can like see what I'm doing. But
Yep.
if you look at the pyramid, right, going from top to bottom, the easiest things to get rid of in this order are money, which is the bottom, then it's time, then it's energy, and at the top is identity, right? So you should be spending money. I'm a very bullish on like 20% of every dollar you make should be on experimentation anyway. So money is really not that huge of a deal to me, right? So long as you know that you can make it back by taking good risks and keeping your focus, you're good to go. Time, I hate getting on meetings if it's just to catch up on the campaign. That's an email. I started sending Loom videos, right? So I was really focused on that energy and identity piece. And that's where I would always ask more questions to clients than I would tell them what to do, right? Every single directive I would take from clients, now I would hold them accountable and tell me, why do you want to do that? But many times that conversation would yield, oh, I want to do this thing because I saw somebody else do it, or we have extra budget or whatever. It's like, okay, that's energy that we can spend. How does this identify with you as a person, as a business?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that identity piece. So it's easiest to part with money, then time, then energy, and identity is the hardest. But you should be making all of your decisions from the identity side. What do you want to be? Where do you want to go? Do
Yep.
you want to be a thought leader in your industry, or do you just want to make a lot of money? Let's work from there, right? And so again, I think marketers are so fixated on, honestly, if we could have this whole podcast in 30 seconds, marketers are so fixated on what they do, not who they help.
Mm-hmm.
They say it all the time of like, we help, we help pharmacies, or we help salons or small business. Then you should be solving their problems, and marketing is a vehicle to do it.
Yeah. All right. We have just a couple of minutes left, and actually, given the fact that we have a couple of minutes left, I want to circle back to this topic of time that you just brought up, and using time efficiently. Right. You were talking about the business using time efficiently, but before we hit record, we were talking about your calendar, and I said,
Right.
wait, I want to don't tell me now. I want to actually capture this, because one of the things that you've observed and probably experienced, and I've certainly observed this, is right. So there's the problems that we've already discussed, but then there's the amount of time and energy that a marketer puts into their own business. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's working a heck of a lot of hours that they don't need to be working because they're inefficient with their time. And you've come across this realization of, how can I organize my time? How can I organize my calendar and be efficient? You gave us a perfect example a moment ago about just client communication and where it makes sense to communicate in a conversation versus an electronic communication via email or something, right?
Right.
What sparked that, and what do you do now, and what do you teach on this particular topic of use of time and command of your calendar?
Yeah. Well, what sparked it was personal experience of having zero control over it and then burning out as a result. I actually, if anyone reads up on my story, I'm pretty transparent about it on LinkedIn and across my socials, but I burnt out twice in 2022, and it was all my fault, from saying yes to everything, taking every meeting, thinking the more I say yes to, the more opportunity I will have. It's all a myth, right? Like, there's this perspective I'm starting to really attach myself to, which is actually the more rigorous and like kind of say no more often you are with your calendar, the more opportunity you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's off the back of 1 hour of deep work, focused work, whatever you want to call it, is basically equal to 8 hours of distracted work. And the reality is when you're a marketer and a business owner, there are a billion things you can be doing. The marketers are probably the most distracted human beings on earth. It's just, if you don't get control of that, if you don't build the business around the life you want to have, your life will be basically a servant to the business. And if you don't have boundaries and constraints on what that looks like, you will work 70 hours a week. And you'll be completely capped in how much revenue you can make, because you are so in the minutia and in the weeds of this task, this thing, whatever. And then you never ask yourself the question, why does my task list keep growing instead of getting smaller?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to, I would love to say it's scientific, Dave, but honestly, like what I did, I took very drastic measures, very uncomfortable measures. At the peak, I was at 20 hours a week with clients, right? Because we promised them a monthly call. And I was miserable. And so because thankfully I have really good rapport with clients and all that sort of stuff, it was still a risky move, but I sent a mass email to everyone and said, we're done with monthly meetings, right? I will send you info via like Loom videos, whatever. So I would take an hour away per client and send like 3 minutes a week. Hey, here's what I'm watching. Here's what I recommend. Here are the highlights, blah, blah, blah. Let me know if you have any questions. They almost never did, right? And they all loved it. 20 hours a week. So with that one move, I saved myself 75 hours in a month, right? But the reason most agency owners don't do it is because they can't get over the mental idea that I need to do that. No, you don't. It's your business. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think honestly that's kind of my role now, and why, and obviously you can tell I'm a very direct human being, and there trust me, I am an empath. I have a lot of empathy in me. But there is an element of, if your calendar is running you, whose fault is that?
Yeah. So listen, we are at the end of this, and I want to make sure before we wrap up entirely. I mean, there's a lot more of what you're preaching here, and your thoughts on opportunities that agencies and marketing service providers have in the space that you're now operating, which is supporting a new direction, a solution to a lot of these challenges. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I basically felt called to do this. It wasn't a master plan. It was just kind of like I spoke to 180 agency owners in the last 12 months, one-on-one, and so many of them sounded like I did 6 months before I burnt out. In fact, I told about 50% of them to their face, I'm like, you sound, and they're aware. They're totally aware, but they're under supported. And so it kind of came down to it as like, maybe I have to be that person, even though I'm incredibly uncomfortable about it and have no idea how I was going to do it at the time. I'm pursuing it in full. So what my offer, so to speak, is I am trying to speak to six-figure agency owners who are trying to get to seven. But the problem is that the way they're currently operating their business is, even if you're at 40 hours a week, which most of them are not, they're at 50, 60, 70, is you do not see a way to get to seven without adding, right? So my promise is very simple. Learn how, using proven methods through basically thousands of my failures, and then actually making sure that they were stress tested. Learn how to get to seven figures while working 40 hours or less per week. It's that simple, right? And so that just happens with one-on-one coaching, and then implementing custom-made systems that they need. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. Everybody runs their agency slightly differently. So it's very much coaching, not a course or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because, I could impact, say, 50 clients a year, 100 clients a year. But if I can help even 10 agency owners, that probably is impacting thousands of clients a year. And so to me, that is a much more worthwhile endeavor, is to help the people who are on the front lines, trying to not only improve their lives, but really support their clients to have better lives as well.
Well, as you know, I totally agree with the philosophy, because I've been doing something somewhat similar over the last several years, and I'm cheering you on, and cheering on the success of those that you're serving as well. So, where can folks find out about that so-called offer?
Yeah, I'm still getting used to it, right? I'm like a very I want to earn it every step of the way. So I'm a very confident person, but it's new. So anyways, autonomyagency.com is what would be the best resource for you. And that is aptly named because autonomy to me is freedom of choice, freedom over your time, freedom, financial freedom, all those things. So autonomyagency.com. If you're a six-figure agency owner, check it out.
Well, brilliant. All right, Colby Wegter, thank you so very much for hanging out. This has been really insightful. I'm glad to meet somebody who has the same perspective I do on the challenges that agencies are dealing with, and is working on helping solve them. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Honored to be on, David. I appreciate it.
Indeed. Folks, you have been listening to More Perfect Marketing. If you know an agency owner out there who should be listening to this episode, please share it with them. Till next time, I'm David Baer. All right. Bye-bye.